Okay, I'm very pleased to be joined by Assa Traoré, who is a racial justice activist and the founder of the Truth for Adama advocacy group in France. And we're very excited to be able to have her and doing this through interpretation. So thank you, Assa, for joining us.
Merci
Thank you for having me and for taking this fight beyond the French borders across the Atlantic so that my brother's name can resonate to defend all the victims of police brutality outside of France.
Why don't we start with your brother? Americans obviously know all too well the names of people like Michael Brown and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. But they may not know your brother's story. And so why don't you just begin by telling us what happened to your brother in 2016 so that we get to know him a little bit, and then we can talk about your activism.
Mon frère.
My brother died on the day of his 24th birthday. And what happened to him is exactly what happened to George Floyd. That image of George Floyd's death that we all have in our hearts is exactly what happened to my brother. They died screaming the same words, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." That image that has shocked and horrified the entire world that we learned through George Floyd is exactly the same that happened to Adama Traoré.
Comme je l'ai dit, mon frère va mourir le jour
As I mentioned, my brother died on the day of his 24th birthday, 19th of July, 2016. That day, the town hall had called to let him know that his ID was ready to be picked up.
Quand mon frère va passer
That day, as he was riding his bike, he saw that the police was doing an ID check, and he was just gonna continue along, but he was stopped. And when he saw what was going on, somebody else was also got involved. And in that situation, Adama managed to run away because he knew that he would get in trouble without his ID on him. And he found shelter in an apartment of somebody he knew. What I'm about to tell you is what we were told by the police at the first hearing on that very night. We were told that my brother was pushed by the weight of 3 heavy bodies, and that he was pinned to the ground, and that they crushed his chest. And then they just threw him in a police car, and what he screamed was, "I can't breathe." He wasn't brought to the hospital, even though the hospital was close by. They decided that they would just let him die the way one would let a dog die in the police station's courtyard in the full sun.
Ils vont arriver dans cette cour de gendarmerie.
As I mentioned, they just threw him in that police station's courtyard, and we asked to have police reports of what happened that night to Adama Traoré, and we didn't see right away reports from the EMTs, from the medics. And when we finally got a chance to see them, we learned that through what the EMTs said, my brother had handcuffs to his back, and therefore the front of his body was pinned to the ground. So they didn't give him any kind of first aid the way an initial police report said that they had done. They couldn't have done that because based on the medic's report, we know that they had not placed it in the recovery position the way they should have. There was no first aid given to him. Actually, the EMTs asked the police to remove handcuffs, and they said no. They told them, "He's only a 25-year-old young man. You can't do that." My brother died at 7:05 p.m., and we didn't learn about it right away. Nobody informed us of that. They decided that they would just let him die. You should know that in France, an ID is something that was introduced for the first time at the time of slavery. A black slave, if he was found on the street without his ID, he could be killed right there and then. So in France, for a long time, an ID document is something that is used to kill black people. We didn't learn that my brother had died that night. We didn't find out immediately. I was actually abroad. I had left the country the day before. My other brother called the hospitals, and then he called the first aid center, and he was told that he should call the police, which in and of itself is not normal. So my family arrived at the police station, and my mother said, "I heard that my son is not doing well." The answer was, "Oh, don't worry, he's fine, he's just under custody." So my mom asked, "Do we need to hire a lawyer?" And the answer was, "Oh, don't worry, if a lawyer is needed, we will deal with that." So my mom responded, "Well, if anything were to happen to my son, I will press charges." No, don't worry, he's fine. So my brother tackled the door and asked whether he could see a high-ranking officer, and finally he managed to. Right there and then, they told him that my brother was dead. They were already trying to hide evidence at the crime scene, just like they had hidden to us that my brother had been dead for several hours. And that's where the fight started. I had boarded a flight on the 18th, and right before I had spoken to all my little brothers, and actually I had called, and I hadn't seen Adama, and he spoke to me on the phone and said, "Are you going to come back? Can I still see you?" And I said, "No, I'm already on the way to Paris." Well, he died on the 19th, and then on the 20th, I came back. And that's when it all started, when the war machine started for all of us. And why do I say war machinery? Because we've all become soldiers in spite of ourselves, in spite of what our will was. Myself and my family are now soldiers as part of this war in which there's really no feelings on the other side. There's no remorse. There's no emotional involvement. They have all the money in the world, and they have the justice system on their side, and it is something that isn't stopping. And actually, the criminalization of my brother started immediately after that.
Quand mon frère va mourir, tout de suite,
When my brother died, the system pulled out a manual. I call it a manual. And it says that it is not the police being responsible for what they did, but they are the victims. And my brother, on the other hand, is guilty. They say that he was a criminal, that he was up to no good, that he was a member of the mafia. And on the other side, the police were just his victims. On the 19th of July, riots broke out right away in our neighborhood. And at first, the media showed up because of that, not because of my brother's death as such, but because they wanted to film the riots that had broken out. And that was before I was even back yet. And when I got there, I said, there's a young man who died. His name was Assa Traoré, and he was killed, and we demand to have his body back. That's when our fight started in our neighborhood, in our town. Young people, groups of them, assaulted the town hall, and they held a press conference. This happened before I even got back. And they did a sit-in in front of the police station, and they were gassed. In the beginning, they said that the cause of death for my brother was a cardiac arrest, and that he was on drugs, and that he had drunk alcohol, but that wasn't true. And we started immediately to demand to have an autopsy.
Quand ils vont faire la première autopsie 3 jours après.
So they did a first autopsy, and then at the prosecutor's office, we were told, we know that you're from Mali and you're Muslim, and in your religion, the tradition is that the body needs to be buried within 3 days of the death, and therefore we took the liberty of contacting Air France, and there is a plane waiting at Charles de Gaulle to take your brother's body back to Mali. We absolutely did not want that. We wanted to have the opportunity to have a second autopsy. This is something that in France happens systematically when there is a death in an environment when there's immigration involved. They try to get rid of the body quickly without performing autopsies. We said, look, we're not our parents. We are people who were born and raised in France. We're French citizens. We know what our rights is. And 1 week after, we managed to have a second autopsy, where we found out that the cause of death was not some kind of infection. It wasn't a heart condition. It wasn't due to alcohol. It wasn't due to drugs. We managed to request that there would be a follow-up, and we managed to obtain a change of venue, which happened then in January 2017. It was moved to Paris, and there's a panel of 3 judges overseeing that. This was a result of a fight that lasted 3 weeks, and then the case was moved to Paris. This is when the war started, and it's a war based on expert reports.
Avant de vous expliquer,
Before I can move on to explaining to you how this expert report war is going on, and then we can talk about the mobilization that followed that, I want to give you a little bit of context. Immediately, as I said, that war machinery started, and 4 of my brothers were put in jail. My brother asked them, why are you doing that? And the response was, tell your sister to shut up. And my brother then replied, you can put all of us in jail, but we will continue our fight. All of my brothers are now in prison. All of Adama Traoré's brothers are incarcerated. In particular, Bagui, who's the younger one, who was actually present on the day when Adama was arrested, because he was the one who was subject to the first ID check. He was put in prison right away because the objective is to weaken him, to stop him. There have been over 70 policemen that pressed charges against him, saying that he was the instigator for the riots that day, and he risks to be kept in prison for over 30 years. This is how the French system wants to stop us, wants to make us shut up. I actually have 4 different cases brought against me. There's one that I still have to fight out in court. My court date is set for May 2021. And the reason for this one is that I stated, Adama Traoré, the police killed you, but they will not kill your name. And this is what made me deserve to end up at a trial. Here is how the French system wants to silence us. There's over 30 young people from where we come from who are now in prison. Because the movement started where we're from at a very personal level, with a lot of young people getting involved. They want to attack us. They want for us to give up.
Dans une guerre d'expertise.
Now we're in the middle of a war based on expert reports with France. There's over 10 of them. If we had trusted the French justice system, my brother allegedly died due to a heart attack, or due to an infection, or due to drugs and alcohol, or even due to sickle cell syndrome, which is really not even something that runs in our family. They come up with these exotic conditions in a very racist way. They even say that he died due to the heat because there was a heat wave, or for other random diseases. Each time there's a new one. So we took to the street. There were demonstrations, and we demanded for these reports to be considered void because they were done by charlatan doctors. Some of them even refer to him with the wording subject belonging to the black race, not even by his name or a name. We did have a victory because this expertise, which exonerated the police, attributing the cause of death to the excessive heat, was considered void. And the 2nd and 3rd of June, we had 120,000 people on the streets in Paris. For the first time ever, there was such a massive event, which is very symbolic value for France. It was in Place de la République, and it was right in front of the courthouse. And this is a date that is now written in stone in the history of French police violence. This expert report situation happened exactly at a day's distance from the death of George Floyd.
Il faut savoir que quand on a...
When we gathered over 120,000 people in Paris on the 2nd and 3rd of June, that was the result of work that we'd carried out for over 4 years. The Adama committee worked all over France, in big towns and villages and small towns, and in the cités, in the poor parts of town. And we spoke to young people all over these places, trying to make them see how that was their fight as well. When we talk about injustice, when we talk about discrimination, it's important for us to create a network based on solidarity. So we reached out to the LGBT community, to the community of cleaning ladies who were on strike, to students, to the Green Movement. So in those 4 years, we started to get organized at a local level first. We didn't reach out outside of what we knew. And we asked all those people to get involved. We did that with initiatives such as a huge outdoor barbecue where all we could afford was small T-shirts that we gave out, but we invited a professional boxer so that it could be attractive for families to come out and join us. And by doing that, they could talk to each other and they could become aware of what the situation was. When we did that event with the boxing champion, the French government actually sent the military, as they would have done at the time of colonization, because they didn't want for us to do that. They didn't want for us to get organized. And then the movement became national. On the 2nd and 3rd of June, at the Paris event, we had people from low-income neighborhoods, but also from the upscale neighborhoods. We had blacks and whites and all religions and atheists. We had everybody there. And even for people who are white or come from the elegant neighborhoods, the point was, if you are not directly involved, that's fine, better for you, but you can still denounce what goes on. You can still protest against it. And people attended, and we were there united as the French people. And the images of this event were very striking, and they reached the four corners of the world. We protested because of what had happened to George Floyd, and we talked about police impunity, and we talked about the racism of police, what this meant in terms of what the French government was doing. We actually were in a situation in which we created a platform which was online, and through social media we were able to communicate pretty quickly, and we obtained over 2 million visualizations. Of course, the French government declared that this event was illegal, and we just fought against that, and we continued to tell people, just come to the street and protest with us. That day, the French government sent the police to my place. I had already left to go to the event. There was somebody at my place, and I told them, if the police shows up, tell them that if they want to talk to me, they can come to the demonstration. And if they want to arrest me, all they have to do is show up there. After that, there was another big event, another historic date for France, which was the 13th of June. That day, at the demonstration, there was a group of fascists, an extreme right group, who put up a huge banner on a building, and the police just let them do it. We managed to take it down, and there was a moment of great cohesion where we all got together and we all confronted them. And that was a great victory for the entire movement, and that's when the Adama generation movement truly started. If I am fighting now, is because I want to protect others. My brother is gone, and my brother is not coming back to life. However, if his name can manage to change the destiny of somebody else, or can manage to turn around this war machine, it will not have gone in vain. I want to make sure that this death sentence that seems to be pending on the heads of my brothers can be turned around. Our brothers, our black brothers or non-white brothers, are considered as people who don't have a right to build the future of the world, the future of France. They're seen as people who cannot be involved in the creation of their own future life. The French government thinks that they have a right of life and death over our brothers. And it is important that we can pull the curtains and reveal what truly goes on in France. France is not just the country of fashion and the Tour Eiffel. It is a country where a lot of people are victims of abuses. A lot of people are mistreated. And this happens in the country which is the cradle of human rights.
What do you think? I mean, obviously, your story is so powerful. It answers nearly all of my questions. What do you think your brother would think if he could see this movement in his name? How do you think your brother would view everything that's happened in the last 4 years?
On a écrit un livre.
I wrote a book by the title Letter to Adama, where I talk to him and about him. I did that 8 months after his death because I saw the way in which they were talking about him. They didn't even use his name. They would depersonalize him. And in this book, I tell him about what happens each and every day. I tell him about his death and about how we are building the network we're building. And then I talk about him, and I want for people to get to know him and to become close to him because Adama Traoré's life does not start on that 19th of July, 2016. There are a lot of things that it's important for people to know about his life. They need to know about that as if he still existed. His story goes back to what happened to our father and to our parents and to our grandparents back in Mali. Our father left his country and went through many other countries to come build a better life for all of us in France. And we had grandparents who fought in the war between 1939 and 1945, and one of them died over here, and another one came back without a leg. And one of them was a village leader in Mali. And that's Adama Traoré's life as well. The name Traoré means warrior. Even the name itself as a history is important. So I feel it is my duty to talk about who my brother was, about the fact that he had interests. He was passionate about soccer, for example. He followed soccer teams all over the world. Now, if my brother was here, I think he would do even twice what we've been doing. This fight that we've been carrying out, we've been leading, well, I'm sure he would do exactly the same. I don't know what he would say, but what I do know is that we owe it to him. We owe it to Adama. I don't know. I want to say he'd be proud, even though it's not even the right word. I want for him to know that his name is a name that now brings hope, that brings change, and that is connected to the idea that people can live in a freer world.
Hopefully the book will be translated to English, and more people can learn your story. One last question. You talk about how you built this movement around your brother's name in France. Obviously, the George Floyd protest here, contributed to the momentum in France. Are you hopeful that some of these different movements for racial justice and for justice more broadly in different parts of the world can become connected in the same way that you connected with LGBT activists and green activists inside of France? Are you hopeful that we can create a sense of global solidarity around these justice movements?
Bah, déjà,
We have already created committees in Africa, in Senegal, in Mali, in Spain, in Montreal, in the Arab world. The aim is to create movements of this kind all over with spokespeople who are ready to join the fight, because we don't want for our fight to be confined to just Black people or to working class neighborhoods. We want to create a world in which all of those who fight against a system who is oppressive can work together. In the beginning, we were talking about a convergence of the fight, but I quickly realized that that wasn't the right way to frame it, because the other entities felt that when we got in, it's as if we were sort of stealing their fight or taking over in terms of what they were already doing. So I realized that the right way of talking about it is alliance and solidarity, because when you have solidarity, alliance is immediately developed. If I don't want for somebody to be killed, I immediately don't want for women to be victims of domestic violences, and I side with women who are striking in terms of better working conditions, and I side with the Green Movement, and I side with illegal immigrants. So this creates a network based on connections that can be promoted and become a lot stronger, where everybody does that in their own country, but they do so together. Because if everybody carries out their fight on their own, it's a lot harder. Whereas if we do so together, in everybody in their own country, in their own world, well, success is inevitable.
I think that's a great note to end on. I hope our listeners, find solidarity in your story and motivation in your story. We know that there's a lot more work to be done, but I feel more hopeful with people like you leading that effort. So thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for everything you're doing.
En tout cas, merci.
Thank you. Now in France, the situation is the one I described, and doing something in the United States like we're doing is important for us, because it gives more power to what we're doing. We're now waiting for one last expert report that is supposed to come out in January, and we had to send it to Belgium because in France they couldn't get their act together. In any case, again, thank you, and thank you for giving even more force by way of your support to our message of hope. No fight can be advanced without solidarity, and this is a fight that belongs to all, regardless of one's color, religion, what food they eat, what they believe in. What we all want is to live in a world that is more livable and with liberty for all. And this is how we have set it up in France, and we have no intention of letting go.
Well, bonne chance and bonsoir, and thank you for the translation. Yeah.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.